Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with my ideal list of romantic Russian symphonies not by Tchaikovsky, because Tchaikovsky is a world unto himself. And we've already talked about the ideal Tchaikovsky symphony cycles, and we'll talk about individual Tchaikovsky symphonies, and we're going to have Tchaikovsky, because Tchaikovsky is great. There are quite a few other Russian composers who are great too, but who wrote either many fewer symphonies or less well-known symphonies. And those are the ones I want to talk about, because this is not an ideal list of performances. This is an ideal list of repertoire, because frankly, some of these pieces are marginal. I mean, they just don't get played very often, at least not here in the West. And the recordings that do exist go in and out of print like crazy. They can be hard to source. I'm not going to worry about performances. I'll show you some, so you'll get a sense of what's out there. But I'm not going to make myself crazy and you crazy, because the important thing, I think, is to hear the music, just to listen to the music and get to know the music. And then we can talk about performances later as the mood takes us, because some of these works really ought to be considered independently as well. But at the moment, I really wanted to talk about the works. So here then is the ideal list of romantic Russian symphonies that Tchaikovsky did not write. Ready? Here we go. First, Balakirev. Now, Balakirev was famous for getting other Russian composers to do things, like he suggested the Manfred Symphony to Tchaikovsky and even told him how he wanted it done. He didn't write a lot of music on his own. He was kind of, like so many Russian composers, he had other things to do. He had a full-time career. Being a full-time composer in Russia was not an easy thing. And he only wrote 2 symphonies. And they kind of sound like each other, but they're beautiful. They're beautifully crafted, very Russian sounding, colorful, exotic, luscious, lovely, lots of L's, luminous. They're great fun. And, they haven't been recorded all that often. This is Yevgeny Svetlanov with the USSR Symphony Orchestra. This is an old Melodia thing that was reissued in association with RCA way back in the day with BMG. And you may or may not find them now. Svetlanov re-recorded them in London for Hyperion. Not very well, I don't think. I think they were kind of blowsy, slack performances like most of the stuff he did in London. He was much better in Russia. And the bottom line is, you should hear them. They're just beautiful, beautiful works. You can get them on Naxos in pretty decent performances as well. So that's a relief. And they're also available on Chandos. And so, and also in very good performances. So they're not hard to find. I mean, the first symphony is pretty well known. The second symphony is as good as Invisible, probably because it sounds kind of like the first symphony, but it's a different work and a beautiful work and as good a work as the first. And of course, there are also these other pieces he wrote, the symphonic poems Russia and Tamara and In Bohemia, and of course, the orchestration of Islami, which was orchestrated by lots of people actually, which is quite famous. But Balakirev was a good composer, even though he wrote very little. And the 2 symphonies are at the top of anybody's short list of non-Tchaikovsky Russian romantics. Next, this one's coming too. Borodin. Remember? I'm sure you'll recognize this lovely melody as Stranger in Paradise. That Borodin. Yes, the guy who wrote the Polovtsian dances, which he actually didn't write. They were really sort of orchestrated by Rimsky-Korsakov and Glazunov, because Borodin died before finishing Prince Igor, the opera. All these guys wrote big operas that they never finished. It's really funny. But Borodin wrote 2.5 symphonies. He never completed his 3rd symphony, which is a pity. But the big symphony for Borodin is the 2nd, even though the first is quite a good piece and very enjoyable and full length and normal in all respects. But the second is sort of the great non-Tchaikovsky Russian symphony. It has a subtitle, The Heroic or something like that, which I don't know why anyone pays attention to. But it's a short intense, beautifully written symphony. Really great. It's got a famous scherzo that's really fast, that goes, and these luscious stranger in paradise like slow movements. The second symphony is sort of the Russian symphony that people do when they don't want to do Tchaikovsky. And it's absolutely marvelous. It's got lots of performances, lots of recordings. I may do a Borodin second survey at some point, because there's just a zillion performances of it. The hard thing is getting a hold of them and getting them all together, and they're all coupled with other things, and I'll have to go and dig around in the overflow room and see what's sitting there. But basically, this is the old BMG recording, RCA Red Seal, with Loris Cheknavorian. And Loris Cheknavorian, he did all that sort of Armenian stuff for ASV. And he's just a red-blooded, exciting, no-nonsense conductor. This is with the National Philharmonic in London. It's really, really well done. I mean, they're just exciting performances. No nonsense. It's terrific. There was a RCA 2-disc sort of box that he did originally. Remember, it had all of the Borodin orchestral music in it. But it's lovely. Borodin Second Symphony. Next, Vasily Kalinikov. Now, Kalinikov was going to be a great composer. His dates were 1866 to 1901, so he was only 34, 35 when he died, which was a pity. He was enormously talented. He wrote 2 symphonies. Here they are, on Naxos with Fyodor Kuchar and the National Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine. You can also get them on Chandos with Nimi Yarvi and the Royal Scottish National Orchestra. They're both very, very good performances. The Chandos has better sound. I think this performance is actually a little more exciting, a little more disciplined. Yarvi was sort of a let it all hang out kind of guy, and I like Ted Kuchar very much. But these 2 works are lovely. They're Russian, but they're Russian with elegant forms. I mean, the first symphony, it's a beautiful symmetrical form. It begins, with the same tune for the finale and the first movement. And the Andante, the slow movement, is so beautiful. It's exquisite. It really is. It's just marvelous. I want to play you a bit of it because you really have to hear this piece. It's absolutely gorgeous and haunting and like nothing else at all. Special sounding, isn't it? It really is wonderful. Just to put this thing away here. And so the 2 Kalinikov symphonies, you get them on 1 disc. They're easy to find, and you really should hear them. You really should. They will easily slip into your memory as great Russian music. And his early death was 1,000 pities. It really was. He was going to achieve great things. I have no doubt whatsoever. Next, this one's kind of fun. And, here we go. Taneyev. Now, Taneyev was, he's one of those composers who sort of pops up and disappears regularly in the repertoire. His dates were, 1856 to 1915, it looks like, 15 or 13, somewhere around there. And Taneyev Taneyev was sort of the Russian Brahms. He's sort of the equivalent of Zdeněk Fibich in Czechoslovakia. That is, his music doesn't sound especially Russian. His big opera was the Oresteia, based on Greek mythology. He was very well educated, somewhat intellectual. He was a major contrapuntist. He's best known for his chamber music, his string quartets or the piano quintet. They're quite fine works. I mean, he's one of those guys who impresses with his craftsmanship, sometimes more than his emotional expression. And for that reason, he's not generally considered to be an important composer in the West, where Russian music means something that's sort of loud and hysterical and let it all hang out emotional, or alternately, like Rimsky-Korsakov, sort of fairy tale, picture postcard, fabulous orchestration type stuff. Taneyev was neither of those. He was a solid musical craftsman, and his big symphony is the fourth. But this particular disc with Valery Polyansky, who I've never particularly cared for, I might add, but this is one of his better discs, has the second and the fourth. It's on Chandos. The Fourth Symphony is a good piece. You really should hear it. If you hear it and sort of forget that it's Russian, then you'll probably enjoy it more than if you come into it with expectations that the music makes no attempt to try and gratify. I mean, it's just good, serious symphonic music in the Germanic style. I mean, that's really who he was, and that's what it is. And it's well worth hearing. It's definitely worth hearing. And it grows on you because it has really solid musical values, like a lot of sort of symphonic music that's more developmental than it is thematically fascinating at first. The more you listen to it, the more you hear. And the more you'll kind of respect the craftsmanship that went into it. And it's not inexpressive. I mean, he's not cold. He's just not particularly Russian sounding. He doesn't sound like Tchaikovsky or Rachmaninov, and that's the thing that freaks people out. But now we have to talk it's the controversial and somewhat troubling case of Rimsky-Korsakov. Now, Rimsky-Korsakov wrote 3 symphonies, except the second may or may not be a symphony, but that's the good one. The second symphony is Antar, which is, a programmatic symphony about a guy who shoots a something that flaps down and turns into a gazelle, and it turns out to be a genie or a nymph or a something, and it grants him 3 wishes, and he wishes for like power and victory and then finally love, and he dies at the end. And it has a motto theme, do 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 do, ba do do. Anyway. It's really, really lovely. It sounds kind of like a lightweight Scheherazade, which is really what it is. I mean, it's an essay in that Oriental exoticism that Rimsky-Korsakov and a lot of Russian composers did so well, and it's very, very beautiful. The problem with Antar, this is a problem, is that it exists in 3 different versions. Rimsky-Korsakov kept rewriting it. I mean, at one point in the anger movement, which is the second movement, it has a fugato, and you realize why Rimsky-Korsakov never should write counterpoint. Oh my God, it's terrible, 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 terrible counterpoint. It goes ba ba da 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 ba 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 fweep da 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 fweep. It's like, it's ridiculous. It's not his best, but so much of it is absolutely beautiful. And one of the versions has an absolutely fabulous tam-tam part. There we go. See that? An amazing tam-tam part, which none of the other ones have. And which one you get, you don't know which one you're going to get because no one's clear on what they are. And it's a whole mess. It's a mess. However, this one with David Zinman, with the Rotterdam Philharmonic, this has the tam-tam part. This one. It was on Philips. Now it's probably on Decca, if it's on anything at all. And you get all kinds of other yummy Rimsky-Korsakov. Really well done. This is a terrific twofer. I mean, it's got a great Antar. But the other 2 symphonies, the first and the third. Now, the first is really sort of a student work, and it's pretty forgettable. But the third is a good piece. It really is a good piece. It does not sound like the exotic and zippy Rimsky-Korsakov that we're used to. The picture postcard colorful Rimsky-Korsakov. Again, it does have a harp, but it doesn't have extra percussion. It's a serious piece of symphonic craftsmanship. And it's really lovely. I mean, it's really, really attractive and nice. And no one ever plays it, which is a terrible shame. There are a couple Rimsky-Korsakov symphony cycles. Again, things are generally available on Naxos. Yarvi did them on Deutsche Grammophon as a twofer. And my choice for the other symphonies, as well as so much else, because it's all here, is this BIS box, which has, I don't know, it's like how many? It's 4 discs for the price of 2. And you get Scheherazade, you get the 3 symphonies, you get Capriccio Espagnol, the Tsar's Bride Overture, the Russian Easter Overture, Sadko, the Tsar Sultan Suite, Pan Voyevoda, the Fantasia on Serbian themes, Christmas Eve, the Overture on Russian themes, the Snow Maiden Suite, and the Piano Concerto with Noriko Ogawa. I mean, it's a great deal. It's with Kees Buckles and the Malaysian Philharmonic Orchestra, wonderfully recorded, and it's a deal. I mean, it's just a deal. It's not the best Scheherazade, it's not the best Russian Easter, but all the performances are very good, very solid, and the symphony performances are quite fine, and the recording is wonderful. So it's a great deal for the Rimsky-Korsakov symphonies, and you should hear the third. The third is a very, very fine piece. Finally, we need to talk about the slightly alcoholic elephant in the room, and that is Glazunov. Now, Glazunov is a much better composer than his reputation warrants. He wrote a ton of orchestral music. It's all beautiful, warm, romantic, melodic, very Russian. It's gorgeous. It's wonderful stuff. A lot of it is. There's so much more to him than just the Seasons Ballet, or the Violin Concerto, which is also a terrific piece. I mean, you hear the tunes in that piece. I mean, the Violin Concerto, the finale, bam bam ba da da ba 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 da 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 dum ba da 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 dum. I mean, it's just catchy. Or the Seasons, bam ba da bam bam ba da 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 da. They're good pieces. And the Lady Soubrette, he wrote this little ballet called Lady Soubrette. It's like 1 hour long. Oh, it's so catchy. And there's Raymonda, of course. But Glazunov also wrote 8 symphonies. 8, count them. 8 symphonies, and a bit of a 9th. And they are really, some of them are very, very good. They really are. And I'm going to do a talk, I promise you, on Glazunov's symphony sets and some of the individual works, because they're marvelous. And he wrote some fantastic orchestral pieces. We're going to talk about those too, because they're tremendous fun. They really are. But I picked one disc as a representation of Glazunov, and it's part of the Yarvi Glazunov cycle, which has recently been boxed up and reissued. It was on Orfeo. But you can find these pretty easily because there's just a lot of Glazunov out there. Interestingly, the best Glazunov symphony cycles are not the ones by Russians. They're the ones by Serebrier, Yarvi, and what's the other one? You know what the other one is. What's his name? Serebrier, Yarvi, and the other one, which I will remember momentarily, I'm sure, when I'm not talking about it. But these are on Orfeo, and they're just exciting as hell. I mean, that's what you want with this music. And this is Symphonies 1 and 5, which are probably my 2 favorites. Although they're all good. 7 is really good, too. They're just lovely, lovely, lovely works. Oh, the one on Bis. There's a cycle on Bis, too. So that's another one to consider. But in any case, I know I'd remember it eventually. But we'll talk about all of those when we talk about the symphony cycles, because we have to. We have to do a run over. I mean, any composer who writes 8 symphonies that have been recorded as frequently as Glazunov's have really deserves a talk of his own. But see, the problem with these works, as with so much of this music, is that it tends not to stay in print. Every so often, someone says, oh, we can't do another Tchaikovsky, or everyone's done Scheherazade. Let's do Glazunov. And so they all, haul out the Glazunov symphonies, and they make all these recordings, and they issue them with great fanfare, and no one listens to them, and they go out of print. And it's just, there's no excuse for it, because it's lovely music. And the 5th here is gorgeous. What a beautiful symphony. Amazingly beautiful symphony. The trio of the scherzo has this fantastic toy music with like glockenspiel and little percussion things and high woodwinds. It's just spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. I think Glazunov gets a lot of crap because he was essentially a conservative romantic, number one, and number two, he wrote ballets, which everybody kind of regards as sort of second-rate stuff, unless you're Tchaikovsky or Leo Delibes. I mean, those are the only two ballet composers people take seriously. Of course, Stravinsky, but Stravinsky was a composer first and a ballet guy second, more or less. Glazunov wrote beautiful, beautiful dance music, and it shows in his symphonies. And for that reason, people think that they're not terribly symphonic. But who cares? It's just beautiful, beautiful music. So I am telling you, start getting your Glazunov now. All these also are available on Naxos in good performances too, for the most part. So, you can find this music also pretty easily. And so let's just recapitulate here. My ideal list, let's get it all in order, that we did it for romantic Russian symphonies that you really need to start collecting. And I know a lot of you people out there, you have all this stuff, you've heard it, you've already collected it. This talk is for those who have not. If you're looking to go beyond Tchaikovsky and get yourself some wonderful Russian music because you like the style, the spontaneity, the emotionalism, the color, all of those wonderful qualities, the melody, these are the pieces you need to start looking for. And they will build your collection nicely, and then you can, explore more as you please. So, Balakirev, Borodin, Kalinikov, Taneyev, Rimsky-Korsakov, of course, and last but not least, Glazunov. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me for this ideal list of romantic Russian non-Tchaikovsky and symphonies. Take care.